Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? I feel like I don't have any mic on, but maybe everyone can hear me. Everyone can hear me, right? How are we feeling at 4:30 on a Tuesday? Okay? Woo! I'm not going to woo too loud because I'll probably go deaf with my microphone. Nice to meet you all. If I haven't met you already, my name is Maeve. I am a climate journalist from London. I live in London. And I'm really pleased to be here with you today because this is one of my favorite sessions and it's actually going to be really fun. We're going to make it really fun. So it's about politics, but not in a boring way, not in a serious way, in a way that's relevant to all of us and our role in it. So we're going to be asking the questions, do you feel involved? Do you feel listened to? Because if we look at the world in general right now, it's kind of a bit full of contradictions. There are voters who are struggling to make ends meet, but the support systems eventually just deepen the inequality in the first place. We've got farmers who are fearing that their crops are failing, but that at the same time they're protesting the climate policies that are actually helping them. So we're kind of living in this world of juxtaposition at the moment, and again, there seems to be a gap between lived experience and the political choices we're seeing happen in the governments. And I would say this is not because people don't care, it's because we are living in a society that's rife with misinformation, with political storytelling, and a lack of political education, crucially, which widens the distance between citizens and the decisions that end up shaping their future. I'm sure you would agree. So we're going to ask you a question today, are you on the political agenda? And before we start our conversation, I'd like to introduce someone pretty impressive, Clara Tomé. She is a Spanish environmental lawyer and an activist, former model, known for her work at the intersection of law, youth engagement, and ecological justice. Her background blends legal expertise with grassroots activism. She is the co-founder of Rights and Roots, which is a non-profit that works with Indigenous women and youth frontline defenders. And through her program, Eco Next Gen, she also translates complex environmental crises into relatable, community-rooted educational programs for students across Spain. So before we begin our panel, please welcome Clara to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, first of all. And let me start with a question. Who is missing in the political agenda? A spoiler alert, it's not lobbies. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe voters, that already says a lot. But what I want to explore today is more deeper, because what is missing is not just people. It might be reality itself. There's a disconnection, a contradiction. Farmers fear droughts and protest climate policies. Lower-income people support policies that favor the rich. Governments declare climate emergencies and approve next fossil fuel projects on the next day. So yes, we are very consistent with our contradictions. And the easy explanation would be, people don't care. But I don't like to think like that. I do really believe that people care. We do care. At the end of the day, no matter what are our differences, we want the same things, right? We want to be alive, we want happiness, we want a good quality of life, a safe environment. So the real question is, why is there such a gap between what people live experiences are and the political choices that shape their future, the political choices that they make, basically? And what I want to suggest today is that that gap is not actually accidental. It is produced through narratives, through systems of information, or better, let me reframe that, systems of disinformation, lack of political and climate education and literacy, and more importantly, through law and policy. Let me start with narratives and with misinformation. Because climate politics is not about just science and facts. It's also about which story wins. And some actors have invested so much in making sure their story wins. The fossil fuel industry didn't just influence markets. It influenced public imagination and legal frameworks as well. So for decades, as you might know, it funded doubt, delayed regulations and policies, and shaped the idea that climate action is somehow optional, or even worse, dangerous. And today, misinformation can even be more sophisticated. It doesn't come just from these fossil fuel industries, but also from groups like the manosphere, from the right-far groups, conspiracy movements, or even wellness influencers. It comes softly, also from places that you would never expect it would come from. But the most important thing for me when we talk about climate politics and climate policies is political identity. Because climate change doesn't ask you, who are you voting for? Floods don't check your ideology before they hit you, right? Fires don't stop at political boundaries. And in many contexts, and I'll speak about my own in Spain, environmental action and climate action has become very tied to political identity. So for some people, especially with more conservative identities, acknowledging the need for climate action or climate policies can feel like betraying their own side. But no matter what are your priorities, whether we like it or not, there is no economy without nature. There are no jobs on a dead planet. And there's no stability, or this main word right now nowadays, security, without a stable climate. And yes, in terms of security, some people should be more concerned about climate change than what they are on immigration right now, but that's another topic. So we all know this. That's why we are here. And yet, political interests managed to turn this shared climate reality into a divided opinion. For example, in my community, in Castilla y León, where I live, the contradictions are very clear. In October 2024, the regional parliament voted on the firefighters' law, the only law that would have created a permanent coordinated public system to prevent wildfires the year round. A law that could have protected forests, villages, and even World Heritage sites as Las Médulas. Surprise, surprise, parties from the right wing and far right wing voted against it. So what happened in 2025? Devastating fires destroyed thousands of hectares of valuable ecosystems and forced evacuation across different cities, including my city, Palencia, and 4 people tragically lost their lives. So you can see before and after this disaster. Afterwards, parties proposed a parliamentary investigation to examine the failures and hold decision makers accountable. But the same parties, partly responsible of underfunding and lack of prevention of these fires, those 2 parties that voted against this law blocked this investigation. Because they knew they were responsible, but they started to point fingers, for example, to the central government, to the president of Spain, when it was not his competency, by the way. And now, guess what? In 2026, we got elections again, regional elections. And these very same parties have been elected again. So that is the contradiction in full color, in HD. People experience the consequences of policy failures firsthand. But political identity, misinformation, and lack of climate and political education mean that experience doesn't always translate into accountability at the ballot boxes. Sometimes in ways that lead people to oppose the very measures that are designed to protect them. So this is a reminder that climate disasters don't check ideologies, but politics does. And this is where it becomes dangerous. Because if reality itself becomes politicized, then even survival can become a matter of opinion. But there's another layer to this contradiction. Sometimes climate policy can feel elitist, and not without a reason. According to Project Tempo, most Europeans still support the climate transition, but 41% feel that they are not represented by it. Many of these measures that we celebrate as climate action don't always serve the communities in the ground who live on the land. Instead, they often serve companies, investors, or the same elites. And in the rush to act, with the premise of climate emergency and urgency, we forget that this transition also needs to be fair. For example, wind or energy projects. We have seen that in some cases, they are established without consulting local communities, or even displacing people from their territories. The goal might be decarbonization, right? But the process can ignore territorial needs, livelihoods, and social justice. The same happens with the famous carbon credits, or nature-based solutions, that far from cutting emissions at the source, they often displace indigenous communities as well. So here's the challenge. Real climate solutions cannot just be fast and green. They also need to be rooted in justice, fairness, and local participation. Otherwise, we cannot get mad when some people oppose climate agendas if that agenda has taken away their land. And this brings us to a crucial question. Who is missing when we design climate policy? And for me, it's very clear. Indigenous peoples. While they protect some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth, yet they are systematically excluded from climate finance and decision-making. Women, especially rural and frontline communities, are often disproportionately affected by climate impacts, but they are underrepresented in climate governance. Indeed, according to UN, only about 24% of national climate negotiators are women. Youth. We are going to inherit a climate crisis that we didn't create, yet we are rarely given real decision-making power. Less than 2% also of national climate budgets are specifically dedicated to youth-led initiatives in many countries. And nature itself, the living systems we depend on, forests, ocean, wetlands, are largely absent from the political agenda. They are treated as a mere property rather than the living entities and right-bearing entities that they are. So when we talk about fairness, justice, and effective climate policy, it's not just about a technical issue. It's about who gets to speak, who gets to decide, and who is completely left out from the room. And that's why I decided to create Rights and Roots, because we see the need to recognize that protecting territories, supporting indigenous rights, and granting rights to nature are not just the right thing or the ethical thing to do. They are essential climate solutions. At Rights and Roots, we believe that climate solutions already exist in the territories, in the communities, in the way people relate to nature. The problem is that these solutions are still treated as peripheral, while decisions continue to be made far away from the realities that they have to deal with. So maybe the question is not whether we know or we don't know what to do, is whether if we are finally ready to shift power and place those who live the consequences of climate crisis at the center of the agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Clara. That was an amazing way to start the discussion. And before we actually get into the panel, I'm going to show you a video by someone very funny. And he is actually in the audience today, so you can look around, you might be able to see his face in real life, and he is going to join us afterwards. His name is Adam Brichto, and he's going to bring some light to the conversation. So who is Adam? Adam is an English filmmaker and viral political commentator on social media, whose videos have reached millions of views online. Adam's work combines street vox pops with sharp presenter-led pieces, often taking big political debates directly to the public, to their doors, and capturing spontaneous reactions when he speaks to people on the street. He's developed a reputation for a very bold and a provocative style, tackling subjects many people avoid and voicing arguments others feel they can't. His videos use satire, humor, and real-world interactions to expose the contradictions that exist in politics, media narratives, and public debate. Get ready for Adam. Here he is, annoying people.
Hi there. I think you're expecting me. We're about to start work.
Doing what?
We're going to start demolition on the house in 2 hours.
Okay.
What?
We're converting this whole street into farmland to provide cheap soya animal feed for the meat industry.
Farmland in East London, you're laughing, yeah?
Do you know Morrison's and Burger King? They need this meat for their really tasty snacks. So you'll be donating your house for a very good cause.
So you want to knock my house down in order to grow soya animal feed?
And how much are you going to offer him for his house?
We're just going to demolish it. We're not going to offer him anything. Or you, for that matter. Whoppers that are in Burger King, they really provide a lot of happiness to people.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why does it say eviction on it?
Have you got a pen that you can sign that?
I'm not signing it and I don't have a pen.
If you wouldn't mind just taking this pen and actually signing this.
But that's simply not going to happen.
The question is, are we demolishing the house with you in it? Or
You're going to kill me!
it's your choice if you want to stay in the house or not.
No, that's not how the law works. It's clearly some sort of like prank or joke or something.
Okay, let me explain. Would you be okay to watch this video? This is a rainforest in South America which is being set on fire. They're also being cut down. All to provide cheap animal feed for the meat industry. And it's indigenous people here that are the victims. They're being forced out of their homes. Sometimes they're being murdered. It's also home to wonderful species of wildlife who, with the destruction of the rainforest, they're now close to extinction.
Oh, I love sloths.
How does that make you feel?
So, that's really horrendous.
So instead of signing this eviction notice, we'd very much like you to sign a petition instead.
I definitely will.
Amazing.
That made me feel awful when you turned up before. My
Yeah.
heart was going a bit funny then.
Thank you. So I'd like to welcome my panel. We've got Adam himself. Please give him another round of applause. We've got Clara back. And we also have Theodore Talon. I've been deciding whether to say Theodore or Theodore. But I'm going to go with Theodore because that's his real name. So, Theodore, who is he? He is a political science researcher at Sciences Po and the Hertie School here in France. He is our academic kind of anchor to our conversation today. He spends his time figuring out why the very people who rely on the land, like our farmers, are often the ones protesting loudest against the policies designed to save it. So we have a very interesting array of panels, of panelists. Adam, how did it feel seeing your video play just then?
Do I pick this up?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't see the room, but yeah, it's quite nice to have. Generally, my films go on Instagram, so I don't get to see facial reactions of people watching them. So it's quite nice to have it on the big screen. So yeah, it's more about whether people engage, and that's what's nice about Instagram and social media is that you actually see from actually how well the videos do, whether it is getting a reaction and whether people are actually changing. Well, you hope that you might be able to influence people to get engaged in a topic just by the level of, I guess, disruption that you create in the video. And I guess this is kind of my style, is I like to be a bit disruptive. And here, I'm disrupting people just who have no idea that they're going to get a knock on their door.
You're just going around annoying people.
That's my job. I mean, I like to think that it's important to be quite annoying. I mean, like, protest is annoying. So, and protest is important. And I feel like I am generally, I mean, my wife's here. She'll know. I mean, she tells me often that I'm extremely annoying. So I'm also just bringing that to a much wider audience as much as possible.
Great. And so let's talk a bit about the work that you do and explain to everyone the kind of UK context for people who aren't Brits. So a lot of the videos you do, Adam, are about about the Reform Party. So in the UK, we have a party, a far-right party called the Reform Party. In France, it's a bit similar to the Front National, or what's it called, the Rassemblement National now. Marine Le Pen vibes. So this is the party that Adam often will go to the public and kind of pretend that he is a member of that party, tell them the policies to their face and see if they agree with it, and then they obviously don't agree with it, and then he'll tell them that these are actually the policies of the party they're voting for. So tell us why have you chosen this quite kind of disruptive, satirical approach to speaking to people about politics?
I think, well, wearing a Union Jack suit is actually exceptionally provocative. So, and in fact, I was at a reform rally a couple of days ago, and there were a lot of anti-fascist protesters outside, actually just screaming that I was a Nazi fascist, which is quite ironic.
Okay.
So, but why do I do it? I think I do it because it's engaging. People want to be engaged, and that is just the nature of social media these days. You have to do something a little bit different in order to get noticed. And if you can find a way to get into their feed and break the echo chamber, which is really, really difficult, then being provocative is the way to do it. So, and it's not just wearing the Union Jack suit. I think it's also, as you say, it's trying to. Well, actually, that reform rally is an interesting point. So one guy came up to me and said, "I've seen your videos online. I'm here as a journalist, and no, they won't talk to me." And he said, I'm realizing that they won't talk to me because they can tell just from the way that I look that I am going to be trying to catch them out.
Yeah.
So it's just a way to, it's just a device.
It's relating to people, isn't it?
It's relating to people as well. But also you do realize is that, most people that I meet are people that want to have conversations. So, I've got a fairly posh-ish London accent. I go to very sort of deprived areas. People don't care. People don't care how I sound. They just they're up for having a laugh and being engaged.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to anyone. And most people are like that. They want to have a conversation because people often are interested in just having a bit of fun. And having a bit of fun just on an average day on the street is what a lot of people will feel like. There's also a lot of people that will just say, "No, I'm busy," and they're walking exceptionally slowly. So you think, actually, are they really that busy that they won't have a conversation?
Yeah.
But you pick up. It's all about just having as much fun with people as possible and trying to engage them in a way that if you're engaging them there and then on the street, you're hoping that it's going to engage people watching your video later as well.
Yeah. And Theodore, in your kind of more academic research that you do you feel that, or do you find that people feel represented by politicians at the moment? Because there was a study from January this year which shows a massive loss of trust around Europe in politics because people feel that they are, quote, being ruled by the rich. Is that something that you see reflected in your research?
Sadly, yes. The interest of being a researcher is that when I go to rural communities in France and I do field work, I go talk to them, I don't go to them to convince them of anything. I don't go to them to sort of provoke them. I just go with a scientific hat, which is I'm asking questions, open-ended questions, and I'm listening to the answer. And I'm never trying to contradict them too much. Of course, I'm asking a lot of follow-up questions to understand how people make sense of stuff. But I'm asking open-ended questions. And it was quite striking, sadly, to see the amount of people who spontaneously would tell me that they feel underrepresented by politicians because they live in rural areas. So they were always activating this sort of urban-rural divide in their mind, saying, I live in rural areas, I'm not represented by the president, the government, or the EU. And I felt it was quite sad to hear this, but I think it was part of the trauma, for instance, in France of the Yellow Vest. I think the Yellow Vest in France, for those who remember, in 2018, 2019, the protest after the rise of the carbon tax in France, it has led to a lot of anger in rural areas or peri-urban areas, and people had the feeling that it was a perfect proof of something they've been saying for decades, which is that the government tends to impose policies onto them without accounting for the constraints of living in rural area, without also proposing some sort of compensation for the costs created by policies. And then, you just leave people with their car and expensive fuel spendings. And I think the more I was talking about this with them, the more I was actually hearing a desire to engage with politics, which is quite optimistic in a way. But at first, it was more like, a feeling of decline in an area, a feeling of being left behind, and a feeling that anyway, no matter what you want to do, no matter if you want to engage with the green transition, it's not going to matter because you're not going to be the one who makes the decision. Addressing this concern is quite tough, but this is definitely a concern that doesn't evolve only around climate, something that evolves around politics in general. But I think in climate, it's particularly salient because these climate policies are going to be policies that are enacted at the EU level, at the French level, and they're going to change the life of communities.
Yeah. Another stat, 29% of French people trust their government right now. That's not very much. So, in the work that you do you think that it's even possible to pass, let's say in France, any major climate laws without a kind of collapse of public order? Because if people don't trust the government, then as we know, climate is a very politicized word. As I say, big C climate. It's a bit like big C conservative. It's especially in the US, but that's bleeding all over the world. It's a really divisive and controversial word to even use. So how do we, help people realize that it's not just carbon up there and things that they don't understand. It's not just left and right politics. It's their lives.
I think this is the biggest trouble that we are in right now, which is that in France, it's mostly the word ecology that is creating sort of debates. When you use the term ecology, suddenly people are not listening. Some people are not listening because they feel that it's a politicized word. But what is interesting when I was doing this fieldwork in rural areas, and I'm also analyzing survey data, so I'm really mixing the deep analysis with people on the ground, with also large-scale analysis of data across Europe, is that, of course, people don't really trust governments, especially in France. We have a long history of not trusting governments. But in a way, trust is a problem, but there is a difference between distrust and mistrust. You can be skeptical with a government and you mistrust them. The problem is when it becomes cynical and then you distrust them. And I think in France we have a mix of the two, but there is a share of the population that maybe show lower trust but could be convinced by policies that change everyday life. The problem is when you impose policy that don't account for these constraints of everyday life, then you might have this content. But what I also see in my fieldwork is people are requesting action. It's like we have this idea of, climate is polarizing. Climate is polarizing when these are a set of policies that impose constraints on people, on some people actually, not on the elite, for instance, but also constraint without necessary compensation. And there is evidence, I see it in my fieldwork, but there is evidence from colleagues in Spain, in the UK, in the US, showing that when you accompany people, when you put the necessary compensation for, some policies, let's say a low emission zone, a carbon tax, when you compensate for this cost, when you accompany coal workers, for instance, in Spain, with just transition plan, you don't have this massive backlash. So what I find interesting is the Yellow Vests have left the idea that necessarily a costly climate policy is going to lead to backlash on the ground. But in reality, if you have the necessary policies in place, people might be on board. Because as you say with the survey data before, and you also mentioned the survey data by Project Tempo in Europe, most people are still supporting the general idea of acting. What they don't support is a policy that's going to constrain their life without bringing any benefit. But if I allow you to get an e-vehicle for a cheaper price than a thermal car, you're going to make money because an e-vehicle is 2 to 7 times cheaper when you use it compared to a thermal car. It's expensive to buy, but if I allow you to buy one, you're going to save a lot of money during the Iran War, for instance. If I allow you to renovate your home with a lot of subsidies, you're going to save money. If I allow you to get access to organic food, for instance, with a cheaper price, you're going to have a lower incidence of cancer. And I think all of these examples are showing that people are demanding potentially action. The question is how are we going to deliver the action and provide benefits to people locally?
Yeah. And so for you, it's about framing it as an opportunity rather than a cost, and that's the way to get to people.
Yeah, but it means tying it to other issues, because when you look at survey data, as political scientists, we look a lot at the priorities of people. And what is true is ecology or climate in general is not the top priority anymore. In 2019, it used to be one of the top priorities, so you would drive people just by saying, we have to talk about climate. And so people would just go to the voting booth, they would vote on climate. This is not true anymore. So it means if you want to convince people that it's something that makes sense to them, of course it's a question of how you frame the climate agenda, but it's a question of how you connect it to other issues. And the top priorities in France are health and purchasing power, when you look at the last survey data. Health and purchasing power inherently connected to climate. So if you frame these two issues in relationship to the environment, which is an issue that people care about, then potentially you can build a sort of a climate or green coalition, green with a small g, but a green coalition that is necessary. And of course, when I say framing is not just a matter of discourse. It's also a matter of concrete policies. So it also means changing the way we do policies. It means probably taxing private jets or banning private jets, taxing yachts. It means creating some sort of training program for coal or like fossil fuel workers. It means putting subsidies for renovation or e-vehicles purchase. So it also means like very concrete policies that impose, like, that you need to find the money for this. But so it's a matter of designing better policies and framing better the climate discourse.
So important, and I love all those concrete examples, because I think often when we talk about things, we can kind of stay up here, but it's nice that you've named all of those policies. And going back to then the role of protest, Adam, I know that you've said before that you think climate activists can kind of be their own worst enemies. In your street interviews, do you find that normal people on the street, do they actually hate the climate, or do they just kind of hate being told what to do by people who don't seem to understand the cost of living?
It's such a hard question because people are so different, and you're always constantly surprised. So I think there is a certain amount of people not being told what to do, which is basically why in the UK Brexit happened. It was very much a question of, we've been told that this is the right thing to do, and actually, and now these conspiracies that it's like that this is there's this elite in charge but it gets very confusing, because you now have both parties on the left and the right talking about elites, but talking about them in very different ways. And people just are, and I think just people are just phenomenally confused.
Yeah.
And so if you start going into if I start going in and having a conversation with everyday people about climate, it's just not it's not the top thing on their list.
Yeah.
Because there's a crisis in terms of a cost of living.
Yeah.
They're seeing wars all over the world. The most common thing that I hear when I ask people about politics right now is that they don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
There's an expression in the north of England which is often used when you ask people, what do you think of politicians? They say they all piss in the same pot. So I don't know if there's a French translation for that. It is. So I think for me, the engagement, it doesn't mean that people can't be engaged, but you have to sort of like meet them on their level.
Yeah.
And actually, there's someone I work with at the Green Party who just put out a video recently, which was where she was talking about how she's trying to become the mayor of Hackney, which is a part of East London, and she said she was knocking on people's doors, and and there was one woman that she was speaking to that she was going to ask who she voted for, and I think she responded that she wasn't going to vote, and she said that she saw the look in this person's eyes that made her realize, you know what, she wasn't going to change her mind just from that look, because she was so deflated. And she said, this is the unfortunate situation we have here, where people have lost so much trust that actually maybe this isn't the right time to be having that conversation, because actually for some people things are unfixable because their lives are so broken anyway in so many areas. So it's about knowing, I guess, the lower hanging fruit in terms of who you have to engage first.
Yeah. How and when as well is crucial, because clearly sometimes, they're not ready.
Yeah.
As you saw, even in your satire.
100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes people shock you. I mean, it's amazing that you can have a conversation with someone and they can tell you in the first instance, I love Nigel Farage, who is the leader of the far-right party in the UK. And 2 minutes later, they can say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, I'm not going to vote for him. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
So that's like 1 in 10. But it's very, at the same time, it's doable. It's possible. So it's about picking the right... Yeah, it's about a game of numbers in a lot of ways for someone like me who is a bit of a left-wing activist.
And there are so many different ways to change hearts and minds, obviously, in like academia, in protesting, in government, in law. What do we think about this kind of idea that we're all hypocrites? It's something I'm quite interested in. If you saw Stuart Goldsmith yesterday, the climate comedian, you'll understand what I'm talking about, in the sense that, we're all, I actually got the Eurostar here, which was great, but I could have flied. I have flew, and we are all hypocrites. And someone once said to me, we live in a fossil-fueled world, so how can we not be hypocrites unless we live in a wooden cabin in the middle of nowhere, and only eat the food that we grow. And don't use money and don't buy into the capitalist system, which would be great, but it's kind of unrealistic. So what do we think about? I'd love to hear from you all about, should we be pointing fingers? How should we be holding governments, Clara? Should we expect them to be hypocrites too?
Well, from my experience, now that you were mentioning, climate activists, I think we also need to recheck ourselves, A long time ago, I was also that type of activist pointing fingers if somebody was doing X or Y without understanding that sometimes, it requires a privilege, economic background to make certain choices, to have time even, to be educated on certain aspects of the climate crisis and see all these interconnections that so many people don't see, especially in rural areas, right? Or like with lower backgrounds, they don't really understand how the housing crisis, for example, or the prices rising on the supermarkets, on the food they buy, is connected to the climate crisis, because it is. And I know that because I had the privilege and the time to educate myself on that. But we cannot pretend that everybody does. So I was also on the opposite position, because I was also pointed fingers at me by taking flights to attend conferences because of my work and things like that. And I was recently talking with a friend on her podcast that actually we should, all of us, embrace those incoherences that we have, because it's impossible to be 100% sustainable in a capitalist system, and we need to embrace that and make peace with that, because otherwise we are lying to people, and we are not making the ecological or climate movement kind of like friendly and open to everybody.
Yeah.
So people would not want to join, thinking that they need to do everything perfect. And I found myself doing that. I found myself, because I have a little bit of a platform there, if we need to take a picture, I would hold, I would hide my disposable cup of coffee, and I would hide my plastic bottle because, they cannot see me failing. And on the last podcast, I was like, you know what? Let's say it. Let's say the truth. We just got a coffee with a disposable cup, and that is okay. It's all right, because that's not the point. We cannot, the system wants us to be losing time pointing fingers at each other, comparing our carbon footprints, so we don't look up. We don't really look at how systemic this crisis is and who is really polluting. And that's why we need to, be honest with ourselves and be okay with these contradictions, because it's impossible to be 100% sustainable. And I've seen these toxic movements a lot in the zero waste movement as well. And yeah, we should be more compassive and understand that we have different realities, we have different backgrounds, priorities, and not everybody can do the same. So I think we really need to make peace with that.
I would say there is evidence. There is evidence that a lot of companies that are emitting a lot of CO2 have been trying to force us to think about our individual carbon footprint. So we know this. We know that they have tried to put the blame on us. The difficulty is there is a lot of work from also behavioral sciences that potentially are showing that we potentially need to do a little bit of the two at the same time, which is addressing systemic inequalities and the fact that the whole system is powered with fossil fuel, and also trying our best at our individual level. It's not going to change everything, but it's still going to contribute also to our collective effort, because I think if we are making an effort, then we feel that we are part of the movement, and we are still signaling something to the system, but also not putting all of the pressure on ourselves. And actually, when I'm even meeting people, a lot of the people I meet in rural areas tell me that they are happy to do something, to make an effort, but not something that's going to make their life unmanageable. So if you think about cars, they could take public transport, even if it's longer, but they need public transport. There is no public transport, they can't just take public transport. Same for if you don't have access to bike lanes, or if you don't have access to cheaper, sustainable food. So of course, people are usually willing to make an effort if they have access to the alternative. But what I found very interesting is there's a difference between these ordinary citizens, we are ordinary citizens, so all of us who are trying to make an effort and balance our carbon footprints or our impact on the environment, and some people who have disproportionate footprints. And what I found very interesting, and that's actually a paper I published in an American journal, where I showed that a lot of the people I was talking to kept mentioning the insane behavior of the economic and political elite. Some people taking private jets for 10 minutes, like Taylor Swift, for instance. Or the government, let's say the truth, huh? Or a prime minister going to Brittany in France to open a school and then coming back with a private jet. And so they had all of these examples in mind, or Mbappé, like a famous football player, who was taking the private jets to go everywhere. And a lot of the people I was talking to were like, I am happy to make an effort if these people also have to do something about this. And what we decided to do with my colleague is to test this with 3,000 people. So we exposed 3,000 people to 3 different options. So we split, as we say, we split the sample of 3,000 people, and we say, what do you think about reducing the speed limit on highways? And usually people are quite unhappy with this in France, so we had half-half. Half people were against, half of the people in our sample were in favor of reducing the speed limits. And then when we said, what about we reduce the speed limits, and we asked government members to travel by train instead of plane, and then the support rose to 75%. And same when we asked to ban private jets in France. It sounds a bit ridiculous because it
Wow.
sounds a bit demagogical, but what I found very interesting, if you think bigger, it means that we have 25% of our sample that is conditionally supportive. It means they are not supporting when you just have the costly policy, the reduction of speed limits, but they are supportive when at the same time you ask, even if it's symbolic, you ask ministers, government members, and economic elites to also contribute to collective action. And I found this very interesting because it means that there is something that is both a systemic change and a demand for individual action that might potentially create the climate coalition I was talking about before.
Wow. That's really inspiring. I love that. Thanks, Adam.
Theodore, I think.
Sorry. Now, Adam.
So for me, I think that laws are really important in
Yeah.
changing public opinion.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if the law is potentially unpopular when it's brought in, but I'm thinking in the UK, plastic bags.
Yeah.
Paying for plastic bags at the supermarket, that probably was pretty unpopular when it was brought in.
Yeah.
Now, probably in the UK, where people, I don't see caring that much about the environment, suddenly do think about that when they go to the supermarket, and it has had a huge influence.
Yeah.
Smoking in pubs, that would have been unpopular. Now it's like you would never see someone. I mean, it'd be shocking.
Or restaurants.
Or anywhere.
Yeah.
And I know also when I go abroad, there are some places. I mean, we have the worst recycling system in the UK, where no one has a clue where to recycle what, and it is shocking. And it just seems like, what's even the point? Nobody even knows where this recycling goes. But I know I've been abroad, and actually I've been told off for putting something in the wrong bin. So I know that there's something better going on in that country than that's going on here, and that's because of a law that's been made. And I don't think it necessarily has to be popular when it's made. It just has to be made, and there have to be sensible people making those laws.
And it's kind of a carrot and a stick approach, isn't it? Because if you get told off for put something in the wrong bin, you're going to remember it more because you're kind of being punished for it. So I think kind of both approaches work. I just want to end by kind of asking you all what you think is, from your own personal experience, or maybe from your academic experience as well, what you think is the best way to get through to people at the moment. I know that for you, Adam, it will be potentially around satire as a way of political momentum, and maybe even climate literacy, even if you are annoying them at the same time. What do you think is the best way that we have at the moment to spread that message and to make people feel included?
I would say first go talk to people, because there is evidence. I was listening to a very interesting podcast with academics from the US who were showing that they have evidence that the Democrats have stopped going to a lot of rural areas in the last 10, 20 years, especially after Obama. So, and I think it's the same in Europe, especially regarding climate. When I talk to politicians, because I do a lot of that, when I go to the media or when I talk to politicians who are in especially left-wing parties, they have a tendency to stop going to certain places. And what these social scientists from the US have shown is that when you stop going to places, even if these are places you might not win electorally, you're also abandoning people and you are signaling to them that they cannot belong to your coalition. So I think one of the key things first I always say to politicians is go to people. I know it's tough. Like even myself, of course I'm not a politician, but when I go to do some of my interviews in areas, sometimes I hear crazy stuff. I hear like climate change doesn't exist, or I hear the people in Paris, etc. Well, I don't have to react because I'm an academic, so I'm just like, okay. Sometimes it's a bit tough, but this is, at the end of the interview, every time they thank me and they're like, this is interesting because I've never talked about climate for an hour with someone. You haven't contradicted me too much. You have listened to me, which second thing never happens. You just listen to what I have to say. And then I saw that these people were progressively changing their mind. And the big thing I want to do is to go back to do interviews several years after, to keep having this discussion and to just try to understand what's going on, what has been happening in the last years, why maybe they haven't changed anything, or why they have decided to change. So I think that's it. And then on TV, I think we have to change some of the messengers, like who is talking about stuff. Like when you talk about farming, for instance, a lot of the debate is polarizing because usually it's politicians talking against farmers.
Yeah.
What about inviting a lot of farmers who want to do the transition and who would defend the green transition around agroecology because they also want to do it. They don't want to die from cancer. And again, if you change these messengers and you change the way the narrative is discussed at the national level, you might also show to people that they are included in the discussion.
Thank you. And that also leads on to our next discussion, which is all about someone who went to the US, asked people their views, and then went back 10 years later and saw how they changed under Trump. So that's coming in 1 minute. Adam, last word?
I'll just be very quick. I just think that talking is absolutely very important, but also not judging. Having that ability to, even if someone's got the most extreme, radical, different view to you, give them a chance to actually share where that view comes from. And then you might not have to win that argument with them, but it's an opportunity then to go away and think about how can you win that argument with someone else that has the same view in the future.
Yeah, love that. Clara?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you both, and to not repeat the same, because I completely agree. I would say that what I see, at least, is that we are losing a war, and that war is happening on the digital era. I mean, in the digital size, in the social media, you know, as I was saying, you know, all this misinformation and why we're like, I was discussing this actually with a MP on the parliament the other day, that we are losing all of these, you know, progress that we had last years on environmental and climate policies, because we are losing that war, and we are losing it in Instagram, in TikTok, in X, and all of that, because it's not just fossil fuel propaganda. We have all these groups that are not experts, but are like, you know, conspiracy groups, as I said, like the manosphere even, you know, promoting this type of like climate misinformation. So I think like we need to, you know, get creative as well and fight kind of like with the same tool somehow.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to add, because I really love that you brought law into the table. Law is really important, as you said. And when we were talking about individual and collective action, this is really important, because laws at the end, they are a mirror of what we deem as important as society, right? Like laws doesn't come just from up, you know, like the fact of you know, putting a price on plastic bags, and most of the laws on climate and environment, they started in the bottom. They started with people protesting, or because there's awareness already in the society, and there's people like claiming for some things to change. So this is really important, that part of our individuals' actions is not, you know, just like, of course, making the best we can, you know, choosing better if we can, but also demanding those laws, organizing and trying to advocate for those policies and those laws to change.
Thank you so much. Please give a big round of applause to my panel. Thank you. Yeah. So, our next guest, I'm going to sit down again because I'm not leaving. Our next guest is a filmmaker who moved from France to Oklahoma in the US as a teenager. And 10 years later, he went back to find his old friends and see what they were doing now. What he found when he got there was a world of what he now calls high school radicals, people that he loved who were now voting for a vision of America that felt like the enemy to him. So please welcome to the stage the producer of High School Radicals, Max Lawlam. Welcome, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. I'm sure you heard that last panel, so we can bring in some of the thoughts there to this conversation with you. So, Max, you went back to Oklahoma, and you found that your friends who you met when you were living in the US now vote for Trump, even though their personal needs didn't seem to align with the actual policies that he was proposing. What was that like for you?
It was pretty disturbing at first, because I saw them on Facebook, on social media, posting throughout these 10 years that I didn't see them, their growing support to Donald Trump. And when I got back, and they were telling me all their issues and all their, how they were crushed by the capitalistic system, they still voted for the person who embodied the most this system. And so it was very hard to try to understand them and to also make sense of this new reality, because to me, it's a very personal link that I have with these people, because I was 16, it was my first time outside of Europe. I was also building myself. So I love these people, and they matter a lot to me. And seeing them voting for Trump and in the same time suffering from the consequences of such policies was a very hard and moving, in a way, thing to assist to.
And what do you think led them to voting for Trump, in your opinion? And can you give any examples as well of maybe some policies that you could see were negatively affected them, that they voted for?
There's a cluster, I would say a cluster of reasons
Okay.
that all feed themselves. First thing when I was asking the question was, that's how Trump won. He asked the question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? The answer is no, for most of them, really. And that's a fact. They are in a better, in a worse economic position than they were. And to them, it was because of Joe Biden's policies. When there's research shows so many more like the war in Ukraine, the COVID aftermath, and all these things. But and so you have this argument, and when you start to go a little bit deeper, they start to reveal other arguments such as racism, homophobia, fears like this, when they feel like they are not at the center of their own society's attention. They feel like all the money, I don't know which money, but all the money goes to minorities, to immigrants. And so they feel like they are in competition with these people, and that's a reason why they are worse off today than they were before. So that's and all these fears and all these feelings, it's not separated. It really is a cluster.
Yeah. So it's a question of attention, basically. They feel there's not enough attention on them. They feel forgotten.
That's the main. Despite all the arguments, I feel like deep down it really is about attention and emotional, needs.
Yeah.
And when they see Trump, they see someone who cares about them. They feel like, and so that's the main reason, because when you ask them for arguments for policies that they support, they really have a hard time naming any of it, and they all say it's a feeling.
It's a feeling.
They believe in him.
Yeah, they believe in him.
Yes.
It almost sounds like a god. They
It
believe
is
in him.
Totally like that. First, I mean, the U.S. is very based on religious beliefs and religious principles. So I feel like their mindset is already pretty open to believe in people. And I feel like, in a way, people believed in Obama as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of them switched from Obama to Trump. And I feel like the logics are kind of similar in terms of believing in someone, in a person who embodies something. And Trump embodies today what they feel like they need to be saved.
Yeah, that's a really interesting parallel to think of Obama and Trump, because they both have their own very specific personality that galvanized a huge amount of people. And in the film, there's a scene with one of your former classmates called Sarah, who migrated from Mexico. And she now lives in kind of constant fear of the very policies your other friends support in Trump. How did you kind of look your friend in the eye when their vote is a direct threat to another friend's safety?
What's really interesting is that the Trump voters will politicize a lot of their own reasons to vote for Trump, but they will depoliticize the consequences of these votes. So what was actually very interesting is being like, okay, in the conversation telling them, okay, do you remember Sarah, our friend from high school? Yeah, that's how she lives today. She lives in fear. She has to hide all the time. She can't go to the hospital. She had a miscarriage. She almost died because she can't go to the hospital. And I would tell them these stories. And it felt like they were discovering for the first time the consequences of the policies they support. And it's not like they discover it, but it's the first, because they're in some sort of denial, but it's the first time that it touched them, or that they felt close to these consequences. And what actually is really interesting is that so I shot this series in October, November, and December of 2024. And I kept contact with them ever since. And so, for example, when the ICE murders happened earlier, it was for them one of the first time that they saw on their TikTok and Instagram feed videos of actual consequences of the Trump policies. Because before that, their algorithm and all their content is just supporting their Trump fantasy. And those videos were so shocking, and people engaged with it so much that it came up to their feed, and it was almost like the first time that they could actually see a consequence of these votes. And it started to shake their belief a little bit, and now even more with the war in Iran. But yeah.
Absolutely. And tell us a bit about your neutral approach that you take, a bit like Theodore was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, he's an academic, you're a filmmaker, you're a journalist. Tell us about how you know, I know that you have this approach that's kind of, you know, sitting down and getting on with it, which is essentially just talking to people, as we were saying before, without judging them, without labeling them the enemy. Why do you think that approach worked particularly well in the American context?
It's a good way to say it. It worked in the American context because in this society, I felt so much violence and hate, and no possibility to have a conversation. And so when I come from France, I'm not American. I'm kind of like a referee in a way, you know, like I'm in but out in the same time. But also I'm in because I have these connections with these people, and we have this history together. So they open their house to me, they open their hearts, their minds, and whatever. And so it was for me a very important way to have this approach, because it let them also talk and go deep into their arguments. But what I would say, for me, what was important is that there were moments where we had fights and we started argumenting over politics and especially like polemics during the campaign or stuff like that. But I didn't put it in the final series because first it was a bit outdated. We were discussing
news that wasn't
from
news
the
anymore.
moments, but also because what I felt was very important in this approach was that they spend their whole day, their whole month, their whole year living in this Trump fantasy world where they only exchange with people who agree with them. They only see content that they agree with on their phone. And so they see me, and they told me, as the enemy. I'm a European journalist. I'm even worse than the Democrats, you know? But the fact of just sitting down, being here, kind of like made it, it's the moments we spent together got them out of this Trump fantasy world for a moment, and they saw that they didn't want to put a bullet in my head, and they saw that we could share a pizza and talk for 3 hours without yelling too much at each other, and that I was not that bad.
Yeah.
And so to me it felt important because, and I'm able to do this because I'm a male, I'm white, and because we have this previous connection. I don't think it would be possible for other people, and so that's why I don't want to push it on other people. And in the series, I'm very cautious about this. Or like, that's my take. That's how I managed to do this thing. But I will never tell a friend who's a person of color or a trans person to be like, hey, yeah, you gotta get along with it. Come on, be open. No, they want you dead. They want you disappear from the planet. So that's not an option for everyone. But since I have this, I would almost say privilege, I feel like it's important to sit down and be present with them to get them out of their Trump fantasy world, even if it's for 3 hours.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, it was filmed entirely on a smartphone. So this kind of vlog style really makes it very personal instead of kind of a big camera crew where maybe you wouldn't have been able to have the same access or the same emotional kind of relationship. I mean, you've been criticized for being kind of too empathetic to the far right because of this neutral approach that you take. Is there kind of a red line for you where empathy ends and complicity begins?
Yes, and I think the series shows perfectly the balance I'm trying to, or this search for this line, because at some point it's just too much and I want to get out, and then I come back in, and I mean, to tell you about the filming, like every night I would come home with this migraine and this headache, because it's a very self-conflicting experience. And so I tried my best, and in the series I never let them advocate for their thoughts. I never let any political argument to be out to many more people. But the thin line to me is really, what can I take? Like how far can I go? And there are some people that I didn't put in the series because there was no dialogue possible. They were just vomiting their hate all the time. There's no use of that, and I left, and I was like, there's no point in there's no exchange here, and so it's a very personal take as again, and I repeat myself, sorry, but I feel like I'm able to do it because I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
But it's really a balance about how to not promote their ideas, but in the same time is how to let them explain their reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like never promoting,
Yeah.
but always just documenting
Yes.
in a journalistic way. I mean, arguably, you were saying before that these people that you were meeting are stuck in like Trump world, like Trump fantasy world. But I mean, some might argue that some of us here, I mean, me included, are also maybe stuck in our kind of climate world. In the same way that we spoke about Obama and Trump as almost having some similarities, and that if you believe in something really strongly, you sometimes remain in a bit of an echo chamber or an eco chamber, as I call it sometimes. Do you think, I think that the power of Trump often is that he speaks the language of emotion, whereas often politicians who especially who advocate for climate change, for anti-climate change, obviously, are still a bit stuck in kind of the spreadsheet and the numbers and the carbon. What do you think that's what Trump's success is down to? Do you think it's the emotional side that he taps into?
The scariest moment in this project was when I went to a Trump rally. And you have to think, like, it's 20,000 people, 6 hours long. So Trump speaks for about 2 hours. And before that, there's like Charlie Kirk was here, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like all the Trump high profiles. And so they heat the atmosphere, and then Trump comes in with the pyrotechnics, with the music, with the edits behind him, and he speaks for 2 hours. I mean, he's a TV producer, so he knows how to play with emotions, and he never really gives out numbers, facts, arguments. It's all about emotional bombing. You know, we sometimes talk about love bombing, but that was emotional bombing.
Wow.
All the time about scary stories, punchlines, impressive videos, and so he depicts this reality where he's the only savior, and he really presents himself like that. And so at the end, people are like crying. They take their babies like to him like that.
Yeah.
It's a very scary thing. And then I
Very
went
religious.
very religious, all about emotions. And then a couple days later, I go to a Kamala Harris rally, and I feel much more aligned with what she said. Not even everything, but with compared to Trump, with what she says. And in the same time, when her speech finishes, I'm almost disappointed because I didn't feel the same emotional strength to her speech. And I'm like, fuck, he's gonna win. And it's nothing to do with arguments and with facts. It's all to do with emotions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a good. I was asked this question before about should the Democrats have done a full-on emotional campaign as well. I don't think it's a healthy way to do democracy in a way. So, but in the same times, what's left for us to fight far-right ideas when they use these weapons? Should we use them as well? And that's a very debating issue.
Yeah, it's depressing when you start thinking, what can we learn from the far right? But I think that actually we can learn quite a bit. So last question, that's gone very quickly. Such an interesting conversation, Max. How do we build a political agenda, that works for everyone, in your opinion? Trump talks about my truth, your truth, fake news. There isn't just an objective truth anymore. When everyone has their own truth, is the goal to change people's minds or just to create a space, where the air isn't so violent?
That's the 1 million question. I feel like the first step would be to create space where people at least agree on the same reality, because we're so already far off that. We're way behind that. And especially in the US, really, there's it's a multiverse. I mean, some people live in a reality, others in other. So before even trying to set a political agenda that everybody can agree on, I feel like the basic thing is to bring back the two realities back together and try to create a space where at least we can have conversations. But
Yeah.
it's a very very difficult thing to do now, especially with how the way we consume media is built, because the algorithm and all the technical architecture of these tools that we all have and that we all use are specifically designed to create our own realities.
Yeah.
So I feel like for me, it would be one of the first things to do. It would be to work with these algorithms and try to promote less personal content and much more like a common sense, common ground.
Common ground. And ultimately, I would add to disagree agreeably.
Yes.
I think
Of
we all need
course.
to do a bit more of that rather than all agreeing with each other. Thank you so much, Max.
Thank
Please
you.
give a big round of
Thank you.
applause. Thank you so much, everyone. And I think it's time for the next session. So thank you very much.